Perfect. Thank you so much. It is 8:37. My name is Leah Tate, and I'd like to call the second day of the Board of Psychology meeting to order. And Ms. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Tate.
Here.
Hirsch.
Here.
Suga.
Here.
Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Here.
Arbsheets.
Here.
Maestrom.
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Gate.
Here.
Quorum is established.
Thank you so much. 2 items before we jump into the agenda. First, on the agenda item number 22, I announced this yesterday, but I will announce it this morning. Agenda item number 22 is the update presentation and discussion on the California Psychology Internship Council, CAPIC Sunset. That item will be taken up in the February 2025 meeting, so it will not be on our agenda today. And Mr. Polk, can you please come forward and let us know about our CPD credit today?
Morning. Attending today's board meeting provides you with CPD credit under Category 1 attendance at a California Board of Psychology meeting. For your CPD records, please notate today's date as November 8th, 2024, and note that we are here for the board meeting. At the end of this meeting today, I will announce how many hours will be credited for attending today's meeting. If you called in to the meeting, please email the board at bopce@dca.ca.gov. Again, that is bopce@dca.ca.gov. Please provide your name, license number, and phone number used to call in. If you signed in using the computer or mobile device, your attendance is automatically documented and no further information is necessary. For attendees in the audience here today, the attendance sheet provided here today will be the record of your attendance, so please sign in and out as needed for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polk. We're going to jump right into agenda item number 23. This is the discussion on possible action regarding the board's position on the EPPP Part 2. Due to recent events, this is not an action item at this time. This is an information-only item. Mr. Burke, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tate. I'll begin by just giving an overview of the board's consideration of this matter. So in 2017, the EPPP2 task force was formed to consider a potential EPPP2 skills-based being generated by ASPPB. The task force determined it was not in the best interest of the board at that time due to costs and barriers, potential costs and barriers to licensure. In 2018, it was announced that it was going to be developed but was going to be optional. In 2022, the announcement was made by ASPPB that it was going to be made applicable to all boards beginning January the 1st, 2026. In order to not have any gaps in in order for any gaps in service to not happen and for our licensees not to lose reciprocity with other jurisdictions, in 2023, the ad hoc committee met again and made recommendation to adopt the two-part exam, and this was adopted by the board again in 2023. Subsequent to that, there were some events going on in the background which didn't involve our board, and ASPPB is here today to talk more about those in a moment. In October of 2024, ASPPB said they were no longer going to proceed with the January 1, 2026 implementation date for the EPPP2 and considering merging the two exams or making it optional. So subsequent to that announcement, board staff have stopped working on various implementation steps we were doing to the BREEZE program, as well as the regulations that we had drafted. And in February 2025, the board will consider new regulatory language with the EPPP2 implementation language removed, and that reg package now will focus solely on the implementation of AB 282. and that's essentially where the board is at this time. I'd now like to invite Dr. Horn and Dr. Song from ASPPB to come forward and talk about the recent developments involving the EPPP2 and ASPPB. Thank you.
This is the moderator. We have caller 5 on the line. Please dial *6 to unmute.
It's not. This is Dr. Atwell. It's Dr. Benetti Atwell.
I'm sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who are we speaking with, please?
This is Dr. Marianne Bernetti Atwell. I'm the CEO with the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards.
Welcome. I
Thank
think
you.
we're ready to go.
Wonderful. I know that Dr. Song and Dr. Horn are before you right now. I don't want to speak ahead of them. So if you could give me some cue as to when you would like me to speak, I'm happy to do that.
Are they dialing in on different phones? This was...
I believe
No,
We're here.
they're there in person.
Wonderful. Then we're all set on WebEx.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and Dr. Horn to be with you in person. I'm Hao Song. I'm the Associate Executive Officer of Examination Services for ASPPB.
And I'm Dr. Jacqueline Horn. I am a psychologist in California and work for ASPPB on the EPPP Part 2.
Welcome to you both. Grateful to have you here.
So do y'all have, you want to hear about the recent decision I'm thinking that ASPPB made and the reasons for it and everything?
Yeah, so you can see in the recent the letter issued by ASPPB Board of Directors on the 22nd of October, and then this week on the 5th of a Tuesday. So we try to, and also we had our annual meeting. That's the annual member delegation meeting in Dallas last week. So a lot of things, new developments regarding the EPPP implementation. So the board is listening to all members, and we try to hold on to kind of the united action to continue to do the regulation support of all member jurisdictions to fulfill their regulatory responsibility. So, but we also know the implementation of the Part 1 and Part 2, as we originally planned, encountered some difficulty in the implementation. So, board want to kind of take that into consideration. So, it's not an easy decision, as you all know. We had many meetings with different member boards, and we listen and consider that. And so the 22nd announcement is like the board will pass that 22nd decision, 2022 decision about the both parts in January 26th. So we will kind of start a new initiative to kind of reimagine the EPPP as a one session integrated both knowledge and skills in that new EPPP in the near future. So that in this recent letter released this week, there's some more details about kind of a 4 steps will be started with this December's Board of Director meetings to kind of discuss a call for volunteers to form a work group. That work group, please, once it's out, and we look forward to your response, because the member jurisdiction will have representative on that work group for the new imagined EPPP, and that work group will formed maybe in January, mid to early January, and then they will start kind of working to have town hall meetings with all the jurisdictions, 66, both U.S. and Canada, to listen to people, kind of collect input and report progress down the road. So we will have quarterly town hall meetings with all members to about the new initiative, and also the board will form specifically a subcommittee to lead this work group, and all these communications, wide and extensive communications about the progress, and seek the input and feedback every step down the road. And also, we already have a job task analysis in progress, because as you all know, both exam part 1 and part 2, they need to do kind of a 5-10 years to revisit the contents measured in the exam. So we already formed JTA, that JTA committee. We received a lot of responses, over 110 responses to the call. In this past August, we already included some of your respondents from your state, and that 20 people panel is already formed. So we're going to have that committee start working in early 25 after the work group formed. So they will bring that input into their work to survey all practicing psychologists about the competence they need in their practice. So translate that into the new kind of a content for the new examination. So these are the kind of in general the 4 steps we are going to do to carry on the new initiative of the new EPPP.
So if I could just add a little bit to what Dr. Song said, one of the reasons that ASPPB paused the adoption of the 2-part exam is that we were hearing from jurisdictions, particularly in the United States, in some states where there's a very strong anti-regulatory mood, that they were really having trouble taking the steps and changing their rules to accommodate the part 2 of the exam. And so they were running up against legislative blocks to including a new part. So that's one reason that, I'd say that was the primary reason that the board said, put this pause on it, because, again, ASPPB is comprised of licensing boards, not of psych associations or guilds, but of the licensing boards. And so it's really in response to hearing this from a number of licensing boards that they were really having difficulty, and they weren't going to be able to be ready for the part 2. So that was a major factor in the pause and taking a look at creating one exam that encompasses skills and knowledge. Dr. Bernetti-Atwell, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I think Dr. Song and Dr. Horn did an amazing job there of really summarizing, oh gracious, months and months of activities. And not to reiterate what they've said, but I do think it's important that I want to kind of just touch base on two areas. And one is the continued commitment to the importance of the exam being a competency-based exam, the need for knowledge and skills to be assessed at this baseline entry level. That is not something the board has lost commitment with or sight from. And I really think overall that the profession has spoke positive about that from a variety of parameters. The other I want to speak to is really the need to accommodate to today's world. You know, I think what we've seen especially since COVID is the reduction in stigma around mental illness and the increased need for psychologists, for healthcare professionals to treat individuals who are suffering with mental illness today. And then in these conversations, taking into consideration an additional step on the way to licensure, those anti-regulatory sentiments that are going on around the regulatory community, and really looking at the overall path to licensure. So as has been shared, this was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision. And I just want to say, I want to graciously respect this board for its involvement, its engagement with the building of this exam, the external review of this exam, your sensitivity to the issue of mobility, portability, and reciprocity. I think you all just speak volumes as to what you have been focusing on, while at the same time balancing the focus on public safety. So with that, I will stop, and I thank you for giving me a moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernetti-Atwell. And thank you, Dr. Song and Dr. Horn. I'd like to open this to the board. Oh, of course, Dr. Kasuga.
I guess one of the things that I'm curious about is the pause. Instead of like, so I'm trying to understand what the pause is, or instead of like abandoning the decision to implement, since there is this reimagined test that is being developed. Part of our difficulty with regulation, as you know, is we have to have ample information and heads up for any changes in our regulations, and it's difficult when there's any uncertainty in terms of something that is paused, that could be unpaused, and actions that our board have to do in response to any unforeseen changes. So can you speak a little bit more about the pause?
Thank you. This is a great question. Dr. Bernetti-Atwell, do you want to answer this question?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for bringing this question up. This is that one word has caused a lot of conversation, and rightfully so. With the word pause, the board was questioned last week as to what does that mean? Does that mean that you're going to change your mind? Does that mean that 6 months from now it's going to go back to the trajectory that was discussed in 2022? And the board's comment to that was, no, this is not a pause in that decision or a pause in this decision. This is, we've heard this two-part exam is not going to work, is not going to work. So as Dr. Song mentioned, those 4 steps that have been laid out, we're at a new starting point. What has occurred with the part 2 is not lost. There has been significant amount of information learned. As you know from your review, that part 2 is developed on scientific standards related to proper test development. That's not going to change. Really what is at the core of this is trying to move forward with the jurisdictions in unison, looking at one exam, not 2 parts, looking at the possibility of an intermingled, questions being intermingled. But one of the things we also heard is times have changed. People have changed. I think one thing that has caused, I think, a bit of a challenge, and going back to this pause, is so many people roll off their boards, and individuals who were in these conversations that started 13 years ago, a large number of them aren't here now. So that pause is being put into place, a pause to listen, a pause to get a better understanding of what the jurisdictions are needing in regards to a tool that will help you and the other 65 jurisdictions to responsibly and confidently license individuals that come before you.
I understand that. Still, I just feel like this doesn't really kind of like quell the, you know, the uncertainty of the language. And another question is in terms of this reimagined test that will include skills and competence. I understand that it's in its like very early stages. Is it safe to assume that as this is developing, that there's going to be no unforeseen changes in terms of the test, the EEE test, in the foreseeable, like within 5 to 10 years, and because of the development of a test that's required for such an undertaking?
Yes, yeah, I do not believe it will take 5 to 10 years for this. I believe this is something that, and Dr. Song can speak to this much better than I, as the work group is working to gather information from the jurisdictions to make sure that we are moving in a trajectory that is vetted by the jurisdictions. The job task analysis will be getting underway the first part of the year, so we are not looking at 5 to 10 years. We are looking at how. I hesitate to even give you a year because of the process that has to be utilized, but it will not be 5 to 10 years. How, you might have to help me out there from a psychometric test development perspective, please.
Sure. This is a very good question. As we all know, this kind of a competence for licensure of psychologists is not a new concept. It's been on since 2000, and a lot of work has been done. So kind of the people are ready mentally for a competence-based licensure exam for psychologists. So that, given this kind of big picture in mind, and also like this part 1 and part 2 with some early adopter states, it's very positive feedback, although kind of a implementation may have some difficulties, but in terms of to have both knowledge and the skills to make sure the aspiring psychology candidates do have this confidence to enter into independent practice to protect the general public and protect this profession, that's already kind of a very well received. So with those in mind, and also these kind of steps we just talked about, we are anticipate to see the new exam definitely not in 5-10 years, maybe 3 to 5 years, I would say. Yeah, because in general, like according to the professional standards, the job task analysis will kind of survey the landscape for all practicing professionals. So we will get their feedback about the knowledge, the skills that they use frequently with great criticality in their practice. Those things, they will translate into the exam blueprint. And that exam blueprint, once it's kind of formed, we will share it with all jurisdictions, with the educators, with the trainers. So this is not something kind of a secret recipe. It's going to be shared so people know that they can get ready in terms of their training or prep for the new exam. So this usually takes a year or a year and a half. So, and then we also, simultaneously, we also kind of look at our exam item bank to make sure we have enough items to fulfill the new exam. Usually, the item will be recoded according to the new blueprint. If we need to add some items, we also use that time to develop new items and create new examination according to the new blueprint. So that's kind of a year or two, half time. So I would say we're probably expecting this new exam within 3 years.
So, go ahead, sorry.
Just add something to that. So, as y'all know, I mean, every, say, 7 to 10 years, a new job task analysis is done. So it forms the basis of an updated exam, basically. So the job task analysis for both the Part 1 and the Part 2 were already about to start. So they were in the works. The people had been picked for the job task analysis task force. What this is, but it was for two separate, it was for a Part 1 and a Part 2. We expect that the new job task analysis now will look at, okay, what are the knowledge and the skills, not separately, but what are both needed, and the domains, the knowledge domains, the skills domains. In the meantime, people have been working on both parts. I mean, people have been writing items, skills items and knowledge items. That's been going on. That will continue to go on. People have been, in fact, the exam committee for the Part 1 is actually meeting today and tomorrow here in Sacramento. So they're putting together a new form of the exam as we speak, right, as a matter of fact. So exam committees continue to meet, item writers continue writing items, and the items are continuously reviewed for the Part 1, as you know, by the item review committee to make sure that every item is fair. And we can give you the newest statistics on that. I think if you haven't heard the latest, I don't think y'all have heard the latest on most up to date about that. So the work is continuing. What this means, though, is that the final exam is going to look different, but it's going to continue to have all the same parts and stuff. Yeah. This will likely change, of course, because now it becomes one exam. So this is just me talking. to the California board, it might be that it'll be taken now when the Part 1 currently is taken, right, at the point of licensure, because it's a licensure exam. So that's mine. Yes, there.
Just like, from our board's perspective, we've been engaging with ASPPB. I've been part of this board since 2017, and I was part of both the task force for APPP2 and then the ad hoc committee that was created with regards APPP2. And from the start, we've already raised that consideration because, our board obviously is concerned about competence, and it is something that we want to make sure is looked into, not just skills for licensing. And I've raised this previously, the whole idea of having one test. And as I remember, it was Dr. Turner who responded to that question with the difficulty of that, how it's impossible, there's going to be too many items, only to be back here again. It's quite interesting. But I think for our board, what is important is to have clearer timelines as much as we can. That way we'd be able to have better ability to create any regulations that we will need. It's good to know whether with the development of this new EPPP test, that will just replace the current EPPP that's just all skills. So, the implementation will be more seamless in terms of it will practically be just, the same test that's just now is both a skills and competency test taken on one day and taken at the time of when the original EPPP is expected to be taken as part of our requirements. So definitely a timeline would be, a clear timeline would be helpful for our board. And I will allow the other board members now to ask their questions.
Can I just respond 1 second to your, what Dr. Turner told you earlier? And I think, again, as we've moved forward, we've learned things, so this was, you may have asked him that question a while ago, but as it was originally conceived, the thought was you have to have the knowledge first and then the skills. And that was the conception of how the two parts were thought about. And it was thought at the time that this would be prohibitive in terms of having just one exam. As it turns out, we've learned things as we've continued to develop this, and we've talked to our test experts, including Dr. Song, who's like, no, I think we can do this. I think this is the way to go. And so, that's to that. I don't think it's because of being wishy-washy. I think it's because of really kind of learning stuff. But we'll certainly keep California and every jurisdiction informed of as we move ahead.
I have one question. So the 20-people panel that you said has some in California. Do you know how many?
Probably 3. I will double check and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Sorry.
Dr. Phillips, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I wanted to get some clarification. And first, I'd like to ask you folks how you've incorporated or involved historically underrepresented communities in the test development program, because there's a lot of accusations made by others who may not be as familiar with how the exam has been developed about exclusion, that this is a biased test, and so on and so forth. So maybe you could put some of that to rest.
Yeah, so I think we talk about this kind of people are always kind of automate the differential performance to bias. We all know every good test, you will see basically a bell curve about the performance. So we do know there are different performance for people with different ability or maybe different kind of all kinds of background. But whether that differences is a bias, that's something we really need to look into. And as a psychometrician by training and being in this professional licensure certification field for over 20 years, I'm very kind of this question is dear to my heart because I'm non-native English speaking background myself. So I did a lot of this kind of fairness, sensitivity review in my own kind of professional interest. So ASPPB, the EPPP, we do keep very, very close kind of eye onto those issues. So as you probably, I listened to some of your previous board meeting, you did some research on people from accredited program versus non-accredited programs and some other background. So we are continue to research on that. But Dr. Horn just mentioned we have a specific kind of a committee called Item Review Committee. That committee was formed in 21 by 9 people with expertise. They are psychologists, but they with expertise specifically for people with different backgrounds. So they have a separate, it's different from the item development committee or the exam committee they're meeting this weekend here. They have their independent review of those items. We every time that when the item is used for 6 months, we retire them and run some analysis. And there's a procedure called the differential item functioning, control the people's kind of overall test score if people by different backgrounds perform significantly different on specific items. Those are items we call diff items. They are poured to let this item review committee to review. We don't even tell them. We just say, look at these items to see whether they have some kind of a language or content aspects might cause different performance. We don't tell them, kind of it's blinded.
We don't tell them who scored what way.
Yeah.
I mean, we just say that this was an item that showed differential function, performance.
Yeah.
I understand that with the test item development, there was an incorporation of a large number of representatives of people.
That's right.
Varying identities.
That's right.
And that there was a great deal of effort put into making sure that they were adequately represented at all levels of test development.
That's true.
So I don't think people are aware how sensitive you were in test development.
Very sensitive. Oh, extremely sensitive.
Nation. Yeah.
Yeah.
The second question I wanted to ask you is, can you explain for the benefit, for all of our benefits, the difference between validity for a licensing exam versus validity for a typical psychometric assessment instrument? Because there's a lot of accusations that there should be predictive validity, which typically, if I understand it correctly, is not a concern as it comes to licensing exam. It's to find out if people have the knowledge, and under the new exam, if people have the skills.
Yeah, that's very good question. This is the kind of as Dr. Horn bring the testing standards. They are 2 separate chapters. The psychology, that's chapter 10. The licensure exam is chapter 11. So these 2 are different exams. So in psychology, you want to kind of diagnose people whether they have ADHD or they have depression, anxiety. You want to predict. But for licensure exam, it's not a predictive because that's kind of we want to make sure people have this kind of a borderline skills, knowledge to enter it into the field, like the licensure, like the driver's license exam. You can know the rules, and you have showed that you can kind of do parallel parking or some required skills, but you don't predict whether you will have never have any car accident or those things. So that's different. So yeah, these two are different, definitely. So the validation is also different. So we're not predicting this person will be the greatest psychologist. No, we just want to make sure they have the knowledge, the skills to enter into this field to provide the psychological services. So yeah, it's very different from psychological testing.
I guess the example I give is if you took the DMV test, you could do all the skills and you could show all the knowledge of the licensing laws. It doesn't mean you're not going to go out and be a reckless driver. It means that you know what you're supposed to be doing and you have the skills to do that. What you choose to do with it later on is going to be different. And I've kind of gotten in this discussion before with people from kind of the traditional psychological, psychometric community. It doesn't seem that they can understand the distinction between a licensing exam and a psychological testing instrument. So I really appreciate your answer as it relates to that. The third question I wanted to ask, and this is more just kind of a what if I understand correctly, now there's going to be, people can still use the EPPP2 as an optional exam. Is this going to create license portability issues as it relates to people that are still just taking the EPPP? So the EPPP Part 1. So are those jurisdictions going to require that people take the EPPP Part 2 in order to get licensed in those jurisdictions? Because it's now becoming kind of a confused picture because some states have already implemented EPPP Part 2, correct? So where does that leave us relative to license portability? And I know you can't predict what they're going to do in the
states. This is where we are right now, which is there are, if I'm understanding you correctly, there are already a few jurisdictions, a few states that are using the Part 2. It's going to continue to be available for them to use. If anybody moves to those states while they're using the Part 2, and if they haven't taken the Part 2, they're going to have to take the Part 2. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. So I don't, once the EPPP becomes one test that includes both parts, I don't know what those jurisdictions are going to do. They may say, okay, my guess is, and this is just me as a person, again, I think that's what they'll do. They'll say, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Does ASPPB anticipate continuing to freshen and renew the EPPP Part 2 indefinitely?
That's a good question. That's kind of the work group probably will make a decision on those. But I will think once the new integrated EPPP is up, we probably will fade off separate Part 2 and 1.
Yeah. It's just that for some of us that have gone partway down the road, it gets confusing, given that other states haven't been able to travel any distance with the EPPP Part 2. My understanding is the statute that we have allows us to implement whatever national licensing exam there is. Yes, that's good. It's not restricted to whether there's a 2-part test or a 1-part test. So we're good on the statutory grounds. On the regulatory grounds, we've stopped drafting any further regulations, except as they relate to a recent statute here in California.
Yes.
So we're not doing any regulations to implement EPPP Part 2 in California. So people should be aware of that rather than getting themselves exercised about the fact that there's still efforts being made on the licensing board to do that. But it has created it's a somewhat frustrating situation. I feel like I've traveled a long way down a road, and now we're traveling on another road, and some of the same ground is going to be covered again. But, you know, it's the nature of the beast. We've had it happen with the regulations here on the board. With continuing professional development, we were almost ready to launch and stopped and heard what people had to say and tried to make some changes based on what people had to say. So I understand that's sometimes how the process plays out. But initially when I heard it, it was just like, I was deflated. It was like, oh my God, we're going in another direction. Because this has been going on for, I think, as long as I've been on the board. Weren't we discussing it, Dr. Horn, when we were both came onto the board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been being discussed for a long time.
I'm sure ASPPB or constituent parts of ASPPB have the same feeling. It's like, oh my gosh.
Also, like Dr. Song says, you know, boards change, or Dr. Bernetti Atwell said, you know, boards change, the composition of boards change, and it's a whole new educational process all over again. So,
may I add? May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I also wanted to follow up. You know, right now we're in a new spot with this decision, and I think, you know, we are going to be meeting with the current jurisdictions that are utilizing the two, because I think we have to hear from them in regards to what this new direction means to them. So we're learning at the same time, and it's never comfortable not to come with all the answers. However, we're in a learning process with a couple of these areas. And what we know is, I know at least one of the jurisdictions that is utilizing the two-part exam right now, they used it for skills particularly. So, and that was a benefit. I think they had far gone some other activities they were utilizing to assess skills. So I think each one of these jurisdictions will be a bit unique, and so we're going to look forward to working with them. And I appreciate what you said, Dr. Phelps, about kind of that gut punch and going a different direction. I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that sensitivity. And at the same time, I want to also, I'm sorry we're not able to bring you timelines right now, but one of the things is, from our learning, we need to be very committed to not get ahead of the jurisdictions and their feedback. So we're trying to be very respectful of this new journey that we're on to. So I appreciate the kindness and the grace that you're giving us today.
And if I could just interject one thing, I think the more transparent you can make, at least procedurally, what's going on, because I know you can't make the test development process transparent without screwing with the validity of the test, but the more transparent you can make the process, the more we're kept apprised of that, the easier it is for us to anticipate what changes need to be made when.
Absolutely. I think part of the reasoning, also the thoughts that went into, you know, the town halls that are going to be happening quarterly. I think that, you know, communication just needs to be at a whole different level, because we've got old learning, we've got old ways, and we have new ways and new learning. So I think that, you know, the association is really trying to have its ears and eyes wide open right now, and a commitment to get this right. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Dr. Harpsheet?
So I'm wondering, we have heard as a board from representatives from associations for different underrepresented groups, and they've shared with us their concerns about the different performance level by people that they represent on the EPPP. And is there an avenue for them to provide the information that they have to ASPPB?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Actually, Dr. Nettie Atwill and I met with some of those groups. We want to listen to the information they can provide. Sometimes they said that they are very anxious, or they have their own kind of Facebook, and when they took the exam, they kind of share their results within that group. But yeah, these are the groups we definitely want to listen to them. Some people kind of they have some misinformation circulated that doesn't help them. They kind of increase their anxiety. They feel, oh, if I tell you my race, ethnicity, I probably will get a different form, and my exam will be scored differently. So all these things, like when they meet with us and share this with us, we definitely clear it. It's not true, because these kind of not true, just the misinformation, and it probably kind of put some extra anxiety to their exam rather than, so that's why, like, I understand people want to know how people perform by all kinds of different groupings, but all these things cause they either don't want to provide that information to us. So we saw some people kind of this person happened to be a repeat taker. Every time he gave us a different selection about his own race, ethnicity. So all these things, kind of, we are continue working to extend the communication, to provide as much information, the true information as possible to them. Because if you read some recent books, they said, the social psychological books saying some of these kind of negative kind of misinformation caused additional anxiety and result in their lower than their actually skills ability should perform that way. So all these things, we will continue to work with them to share the information. We try to be very kind of transparent, extend our communication, town halls, these invited meeting. You invite us, or we kind of, once people invite us to talk with their professional groups, or even sometimes we reach out to these specific groups during the APA convention, during other like platform. We want to share the true information, because we know people want to enter this field. We are short of a workforce, so we want to bring people more and a good quality, very diverse group into this workforce. So we try by all means to share, to listen, and to clarify any misinformation as we can.
When they say, if a group comes to you and says, your general passing rate, overall passing rate is X, but ours is this much lower, and it's not necessarily misinformation. How do you respond to that, or what do you do with that?
That's a very good question, because as I said, every good exam, you will see some people perform better than the others, those things. But how do you can improve? We want to kind of provide the very clear candidate handbook, explain how the exam together, the detailed exam blueprint, so they know what to kind of how to prepare, right? And also we provide sample exams. That's exactly the same question, either retired, real questions, or extra questions in the item bank. We follow the same blueprint just to make it maybe half of the real exam, and you can take it at home. You can take it at the Pearson Testing Center. So more familiar you are with the exam, the format, the content, the better they usually perform. So, but we are like a professional licensure association, right? We are not a test prep company. We are not training education program. We can only do as much as we can, but whether kind of completely remove the different performance, that makes the exam not a good exam. Every good exam, you will see differential performance, right?
You know, maybe the Association of Black Psychologists, who one time came to one of our meetings and says our numbers are lower than the overall pass rate consistently. And I don't know what those numbers are. I just believe what they said. And it's a worry. It's a worry.
You know, if I can just add something here, I think it's a more complex issue than that. I mean, I think the focus has been on the test. I don't know why the numbers of one group might be lower than another group, but I can tell you, just in the 2,000 items we've reviewed now, the item review committee has reviewed. They've they've reviewed 2,000 items. They have looked at 40 of those items. There was a differential performance on those items. They took out 8 items. Half of the items they took out, because they do this review blindly, were answered better by groups of color and the comparison groups, and half of the items were answered better by a group of white psychologists. So I don't think it's in the exam. I think it's a more complex issue than the exam.
So please, can I just follow up on what Dr. Hartsheet is asking? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, which is, what I just heard is if Group A is doing worse than Group B on this exam, we are to expect that that is absolutely okay because we expect differentiation. And so, did I hear that correctly? One. And two, if that is true, how is it the case then that the exam isn't biased towards Group A if Group A is collectively, when we control for that characteristic, not passing at a statistically significant rate? Right? I think I understand that the pass rates are different, but they are statistically insignificant. But if the difference is statistically significant, and if Group A is doing worse than Group B, how is that acceptable that we think that this exam is working well?
I guess the first question, you definitely, we are looking into that, right? We try to understand, but from the test development perspective, like what Dr. Horn just said, we try to kind of, that's the item level is the kind of basic unit for the exam. So we try to start from the very basic level to make sure the exam not item by item accumulated to cause that overall test performance differences. That's what we did, and we are very confident. We are not, the item are not kind of specifically biased for or against a certain group. But in terms of whether we accept the differences, no, we are trying to work with the communication community, education, training, and others, kind of those specific groups, try to understand what caused it. They are much more complex than just the exam. The exam more like they reflect some kind of social, economic, or other training differences. It's not the exam caused them the differences. That's what I try to say. Definitely, we will kind of work with all interested groups to understand how can we help them. Actually, I just met Sam Sands in Minnesota board. They provide some additional help to those disadvantaged groups to provide some support for them to take additional training. And the preliminary results showed very good positive impact for those people entered into that specific program. 9 candidates, 7 passed. So that's something probably we can together to explore how to kind of help people to improve performance. But in terms of like ASPBB, the exam developer, we tried on our end, but this is definitely a very complex issue.
I'll just make this is more of a comment, not a question, which is if there are accusations that different groups are performing differently on the exam, I think the best way to answer those accusations is to release the data on what is happening on those exams based on those characteristics. And if those characteristics show a comparable passage rate, I think those accusations don't have any facts to stand on. What I sense is that the data does not necessarily support that, and that if you were to release that data about across different characteristics, my suspicion is that there are different passage rates, and that would feed into those accusations. Is that you're welcome to respond to that comment, but I haven't seen the passage rates broken down by those characteristics other than schools, because because ASCB did do the school breakdown of APA and non-APA accreditation. But if we were to look at a host of different characteristics, and those were publicly available, that would answer the charges of different performances amongst groups. So.
I think it's somewhat more complicated than that in the sense that, for instance, we know historically that non-accredited programs tend to have a larger representation of people from communities of color. Those programs may or may not be, I don't know, as good at preparing people in the basic knowledge related to psychology. So there's more variables than just race. And if you were to just look at the variable of race, I think you could get a skewed picture of what's going on. So would require a very complex model to show economic disadvantage, educational disadvantage, and those types of things. So I'm as equally concerned as you are about making sure that we have a test that does not have an implicit bias in it. But let me go back to the DMV example. If the DMV test, which I believe is culturally neutral, but maybe it's not, the DMV test asks you what speed you can go in what area, et cetera, and there were differential results by group. It's not necessarily about the test construction. It may be about something else. So I'm not trying to defend biased tests.
I would say in an effort not to get too deep into the weeds on this informational only item. Right. Again, there's no action here. Sorry, I was going to say I'd love to open it up for public comment. No, but go ahead if you have a comment.
I just want to say that I am happy to see ASCB move in this direction because it reflects feedback we heard here in our meetings over years that I didn't always feel was heard. And so I like this new direction more. I do want to speak to some of the issues that have come up about transparency and about not getting ahead of the jurisdiction and about really continuing to work with us, the jurisdiction, on how we communicate this new path forward. I assure you, with no data, I assure you that people in the community who are thinking about entering this profession may have heard there's going to be a new exam, a new thing, what does that look like, and are probably going to make determinations about when to start their training or when to take the exam based on information that to them feels uncertain. Okay, I need, as part of this board, for ASPPB to really adopt clear, transparent communications with us in a way that can be shared with our stakeholders and with other groups of psychologists, of professional psychologists of varying identities that are not, often not reached with this information, so that they can deal with the misinformation that you mentioned earlier, because I'm aware that happens. I'm not a trained psychologist, but in the community, I'm aware of misinformation about the licensure process. And I feel in this moment, ASPPB needs to really step in and be real transparent, really send entire articles to us, to other jurisdictions. This is something to share with your stakeholders. We have newsletters, we have social media channels, other groups have other things, but really make it a campaign of something that can be shared. I am gonna say very honestly that sometimes I felt like there was feedback given here that wasn't heard, that wasn't appreciated by ASPPB leadership at the time. And it mattered. It mattered. We said it here. It really did. And we need you to help us really create a transparency and confidence in the regulatory process for those who want to enter the profession, and to help deal with a real issue of test anxiety. I'm an educator, so test anxiety, learning, and these types of things are really near and dear to my heart. And that's part of the complexity of these issues we're talking about. But if people don't know, they can't help but sit there and be anxious. They can't help, if they don't know where to go for information, they're gonna hear their, whatever thing they're gonna hear. You need to do a better job of communicating, and we wanna be your partner to support the profession and confidence in the regulatory structure. That's my soapbox for today.
Thank you, Dr. Cervantes.
I really just want to put an exclamation mark on that.
It shouldn't have to take a Federal Trade Commission complaint, a bylaw threat, change threat to get to where we are. When many of the things that Dr. Kusuga said and shared happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But we are where we are now because a jurisdiction put forth a bylaw amendment change that was a inflection point for the organization, for ASPPB. And that same jurisdiction filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. That jurisdiction also brought along 11 other jurisdictions to share that perspective, which is about a third of your a fourth of your membership, if I recall the votes correctly. So it was an existential threat. Oh, 66. I was just doing the 29 to a 12 vote that voted down the bylaw change. But it took an existential crisis to bring us here to this point, rather than authentic stakeholder engagement that really could have been a collaborative process.
Dr. Tate, I just wanted to get clarification on, in the sake of transparency and communication, about the work group that Dr. Song mentioned that will have representatives from each jurisdiction boards. Are the work group representatives going to be board members, board staff? What would that look like?
The work group, I don't think we are envisioned based on Dr. Bernadette Edwell. You can correct me. What I hear from last week's annual meeting, we want to make it kind of a nimble, sizable. So it's not definitely 66, one representative from each jurisdiction, some representatives of the jurisdiction. Yeah, we will going to send out a call. So please respond, put your name in the hat, but we'll make sure they are jurisdictional representatives on that. But I cannot say we are going to expect one from each out of the six. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Or?
So it's going to be a work group comprised of some people representing different jurisdictions, and how big is the kind of like ideal size for this work group?
That I would say about, okay, but Dr. Bernadette Edwell, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Song. I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go ahead.
Oh, I think, yeah, you can go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so right now we are working on the charges for the group. It is anticipated that this group will need to be in a manageable size. I would say 12 to 15. And the representation for this group is going to come from jurisdictional members, the exam program committees within the association, staff, and liaison groups. There will also be a board representation because we are, as Dr. Song mentioned this morning, and as you may have seen in our communication, a sub-board group that is going to interface with this workforce. Just so you know, it is not board-centric. It is not board-heavy. It is jurisdictional heavy because that, I think, is the most important piece in this juncture right now. So I hope that answers your question a little more.
Did that answer? Any other board comment?
Brief one. And I think you've already addressed it in a way. It's been implicitly addressed. It was also addressed by Dr. Cervantes. The use of language sometimes in the communications that we get from ASPB makes it more confusing. The word cause, for instance, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the clearer you can be about what the actual intent is, as opposed to kind of making into a PR release, the better I think that we're going to be able to deal with it.
I completely agree. I think that's very good comments from all of you. And we will take that back. But we ourselves, the three of us, we will definitely make that at the forefront for everything going forward. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comment before I open it up? Thank you to the board. Any public comment, please come forward. Absolutely. So maybe you can slide the chair over to get closer to the microphone. Yep, yes. I'm sorry.
We can move that.
Please go ahead, you have 2 minutes.
I'm Dr. Janet Farrell from San Diego. ASPPB appeared to pause the mandatory EPPP to adoption requirement because they feared loss of revenue. And that's what I want to focus on today is the money. They did this right after Dr. Fu mentioned this. The Texas Board of Psychology filed a letter of complaint with the Federal Trade Commission that they violated antitrust laws by not keeping the states involved in the approval and input of it. So there was that, and then Texas, the Texas board was going to the legislature in their state to get funding for an alternative, less costly test for the entering psychologists. This was going to add, EPPP2 was going to add more money to the entering students' bills. And then what they said was, when this came out, the pause, which again, a pause, says it's clear that they intend to repackage the same ideas and try to force it through at a later date, and that a price hike is likely still on the horizon. Nobody talked today about the price to these entering students of this additional piece. And that's what I think is a really big issue. And I admire the states that are looking into an alternative. And a lot of them are doing that now. And what this did is it cast a light on the way ASPPB operates financially. And what's going on here, I see, is that there is a conflict of interest between a corporation formed to represent state and provincial boards while operating as a test publisher whose profits derive from the same captive market they're supposed to be serving. The Louisiana Psychology Times reported in 2019 that in the 2017 ASPP budget, there was $8 million on the books at that time. Why does a private non-profit corporation need more than that? Shouldn't they be lowering the cost to entering psychologists rather than raising them? And why did ASPPB in 2017 budget spend for 12 employees and 8 board members a staggering $1.17 million on travel expenses alone? This is what I think needs to be looked at, is trying to keep costs under control and looking for and I fear that they put so much into this EPPP2, and they're going to try to justify increasing the cost because of that. And I think you want to follow the money. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Dr. Farrell. If there's any other public comment in the room, please come forward. Thank you. Mr. Moderator, can we please open up public comment on WebEx?
Absolutely.
With a 2-minute limit, please.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... in order to find your hand button. You have 3 different pages, and only one of them has that hand button. I would also encourage Kathleen and Louisa to raise your hands. I saw that you wrote something in the Q&A box, and if you would like to say that out loud for the group, I think it would be greatly appreciated. We're going to start with Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. Oh, hold on. My screen just jumped. We may have lost Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. Next is Sydney Menyon. Hold on, we're sending you a request to unmute your... Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman is back. Let's try again.
Winkleman with the California Board of Psychology. I'm sorry, California Psychological Association. I wanted to thank the Board of Psychology. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm using up half my 2 minutes with that mess up. Anyway, I want to thank the Board of Psychology for your careful consideration of the EPPP2 over the years, and thank Drs. Bernetti, Atwell, and Song and Drs. Horn for their attending and providing additional information and hearing feedback from the board today. I do appreciate that the Board of Psychology will not be moving forward with the EPPP2. As you know, and as reflected in CPA's opposition letter, and in the BOP, Board of Psychology materials, CPA opposed the adoption of the EPPP2 due mainly to it being an unnecessary barrier to licensure, the costs and the burdens, the delayed access to care, and the questions that have been raised about the validity and potential disproportionate impact on underrepresented groups. Also concerns about lack of transparency and lack of meaningful stakeholder input. I had a question, a procedural question for the board, and perhaps Mr. Burke or the board counsel can answer. In its May 2023 meeting, the board agreed to adopt the two-part EPPP2 exam in January 2026. Now, and according to the ASPPB, the EPPP Part 2 does still remain available as an optional test. So I just wanted to confirm that there is no action needed to reverse that May 2023 adoption. I understand as a practical matter, the regulations are not moving forward to implement it, but just wanted to mention those issues and raise the question of whether a formal board action is needed. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Anthony Payne, board counsel, and yes, no formal action by the board is needed.
All right, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Sydney Mannion. Hold on just a second. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for discussing this topic. I've heard it discussed by the board numerous times. Is everybody able to hear me okay?
Yes, please continue.
Okay, thank you. You were discussing the racial bias possibilities and things like that. One of my questions is if the purpose of the exam is to develop some kind of uniformity of competency of practice, has there been studies done on individuals that have been disciplined and taken through the disciplinary process from the board and looked at the analysis of their success or pass rate on the exam? So is there actual evidence to show that the exam actually, successful passing of the exam actually contributes to individuals that are less likely to go through the disciplinary process? Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from... Oh, go ahead, please.
Would you like to speak to that, Dr. Horn or Dr. Song?
Yeah, I can briefly answer, and Dr. Horn can add something. First of all, those discipline data are very sparse data. They are kind of usually those, we do have a separate department to manage that discipline data from jurisdictions. I looked at those data a while ago, but those mainly for people in the practice for quite some years, not recently licensed. So to link that to their very long time ago results may not kind of really give very meaningful analysis. Because first of all, the data very few. A lot of times you know whether this person is a good psychologist you will use for yourselves or for your friends, but you may not kind of really report any discipline complaints.
There's a very low base rate just of complaints, as you all know. I mean, given how many licensed psychologists there are. So there's a very low base rate. It's back to the analogy of a driver's license. Of course, everybody who's practicing has passed the exam, so it's not that anybody gets to practice who hasn't passed the exam. So, typically people don't get in trouble early in their careers. They start getting in trouble more mid-career. So it's not really a good indicator of pass rate or anything.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Keep going, please.
All right. Next, we're going to hear from Cindy. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm Cindy Yee Bradbury. I'm a professor at UCLA, and on behalf of my colleagues at UCLA, as well as the other UC clinical psychology training programs, I want to join CPA and ASPPB in thanking the board for all that you've done, starting back as early as 2018 with organizing the EPPP task force that included us as stakeholders to really help try to determine how best to approach the EPPP2, given the many concerns that were and continue to be associated with it. We're incredibly grateful that California is stopping plans to implement a two-part exam, and we hope you'll use this inflection point to continue assisting ASPPB in devising a better and more equitable instrument, as we've been discussing, to assess the qualifications of psychological practitioners in California. One thing I want to mention as a gentle reminder is that we do have in our ranks clinical and quantitative psychologists who have the expertise to assist with developing equitable tests of competency, including professional exams, which, as we all know and have been discussing, present a number of complex challenges. And our hope is that the board will encourage fully exploiting this expertise as the board and ASPPB move forward. Reviewing differential item performance is certainly one approach, but it does not speak to how the test might perform differentially as a whole, okay? The whole is different than just a sum of parts. It's also concerning to put tests in place without a sense of who might pass or fail the test, or whether failure relates to any meaningful indices or outcomes. We believe that such knowledge is fundamental to protecting the interests of California consumers and stakeholders at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Marilyn Imus. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone. Let's try that again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. I would like to piggyback on several of our stakeholders' statements. This is Marilyn Imus, Dr. Marilyn Imus from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I also would like to thank and commend the board for their diligence and persistence and information bringing together of various stakeholders in various areas. This is very important to us. We know as psychologists and clinicians in correctional mental health that we have to have special competencies for working with incarcerated populations, in addition to those of other clinical areas of practice. We welcome the ability to participate in any information gathering, documentation. Think of CDCR maybe as an additional resource with additional types of information. We have a very, very diverse population of patients and of psychologists. We're a large employer of psychologists in California. So we are here and happy to provide support, information.
30 seconds.
I'm actually done. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Imus.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Next, we're going to hear from Louisa Tromel. I hope I said that correctly. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead, please.
Okay, this is Dr. Tromel. I too work for the California Department of Corrections. I'm a senior psychologist specialist specializing in suicide prevention and self-harm reduction. I work both the inpatient and outpatient unit at Salinas Valley State Hospital. I just wanted to speak to a couple of things just real quickly. I was a collaborating investigator for the DSM-5. And one of the things our team did was they reached out to resources with mental health resources within the community to do pre and post tests. So what I'm asking the board to consider is in addition to the academia that gives input for work groups and for test construction, test development, I'm asking that the board consider also the community. And like Dr. Emus said, we have a very unique population. Many of the incarcerated are there because of trauma, deprivation, because of poverty, and oftentimes because of their sentences, they do resort to avenues of self-harm. So I'm asking the board to consider looking outside of just academia and looking to community mental health, also looking to the Department of Corrections, because we have an underserved population, and they're rarely considered when we provide any kind of services for mental health. The other thing I just wanted to mention is we do have a group of people that are returning to their education that are in a specific age group, and I think we should consider that because we do have a growing senior population, and I think our folks that are becoming newly licensed should be part of that group that is focused on. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Potentially our last comment for this item, Taylor Renaid. I hope I said that correctly. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
This is Tyler Rindy with the California Psychological Association. Just want to thank the board for the conversation this morning and for ASPPB for their attendance. One request for ASPPB is when you were discussing around the town halls, the quarterly ones. If there's a request for it to be open to the public to end up participating or at least listening in, so that in the spirit of transparency and bringing along, all stakeholders and understanding the process that you're undergoing for a combined, reimagined EPPP. Thank you for the, discussion again this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are all of our requests for public comment for this item.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Coming back to the board, the takeaways I just had were, sounds like the University of California and the Department of Corrections have people that can help you out if you'd like to. Before we close this item, any last comments from the board? Perfect. Thank you so much.
We actually have people working on both exams who are from the Department of Corrections and the University of California system. So just letting you know.
So they're already in. They're already helping. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting this morning. And we're going to take just a quick break. We'll reconvene at 10:25. That's okay. Thank you. This is Leah Tate. It is 10:26, and we are back at the Board of Psychology meeting. Ms. Whitney, can you please call the roll?
Tate?
Here.
Here. Huga?
Here.
Fontes?
Here.
Fu?
Here.
Herbsheets? Here. Nystrom?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Sate?
Here.
Quorum is established.
Thank you so much. We will be jumping to agenda item number 29. This is election of officers, and I will be handing the helm over to Mr. Anthony Payne.
Thank you.
President Tate. We do this the last meeting of the year, and the elections are effective January 1 of the next year. So I think everybody here recalls how this went last year, so we will be repeating that. The first is I will do a call for nominations in alphabetical order, and then if the nominees are acceptable, then we will have a vote. First for the vote for president, and then vote for vice president. So I will look to Dr. Kasuga first for any calls for nomination for the office of president.
I am very honored to be the first in the alphabet and to nominate Dr. Tate for president.
Thank you. Dr. Cervantes, do you have any nominations?
No.
Fu?
No nominations.
No nominations.
Phillips?
No nominations.
No nominations.
Rogers, none. Dr. Tate?
No. Me.
Dr. Tate, would you accept the nomination?
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Good. At this time, I will call for a vote for the office of president. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Who is a first? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any comment? Any board comment? Any comment from the public? In the room or over WebEx?
This is the moderator. As soon as you
Seeing any.
confirm. My apologies.
Just wanted to confirm there's no request for public comment.
Let me make a spiel. We are open for public comment on 29. If you'd like to make a comment on the election of the officers, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, then in that case, I will ask Ms. Whitney call the roll.
Suga?
Aye.
Fontes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Herbsheets?
Aye.
Nystrom? Phillips?
Aye.
Rescate?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate? Aye. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And now moving on to Vice President.
I am happy to nominate Dr. Rogers for vice president.
Dr. Cervantes, do you have any nominations?
No.
Mr. Fu?
No.
No.
Nystrom?
No.
No. Phillips?
Nope.
And Rescate?
No.
Rogers?
No.
No. Dr. Tate?
No.
Okay. If nominated, would you accept the nomination?
Gladly.
Okay. Then I will call the roll for vice president.
You want public comment?
Yeah. Is there any? Yes, I do. Thank you.
So moved.
I got way ahead of myself. I still have the gavel in my hand. Okay. Mr. Fu is a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Phelps. Any board comment? Okay. Any public comment in the room? Mr. Moderator, any comment on WebEx on the motion for Vice President?
Let's check. We are open for public comment on the nomination for Vice President. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Please, thank you. Ms. Whitney, can I ask you to call the roll, please?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Tess. Aye. Fu.
Aye.
Archie.
Aye.
Nystrom. Phillips.
Aye.
Scate. Rogers. Tate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Agenda item number 30, recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. I'm opening this up to the board. Any suggestions? Oh, let me guess. Dr. Kasuga.
Well, I have two.
Oh, okay.
Not that it's going to be a surprise. It's similar to last meeting. First of all, I'd like to have a mindfulness activity from our newly elected Vice President, Dr. Rogers, and I would like to make sure that we have HCI present on our February meeting, since they weren't able to present on our August meeting as usual.
Yes, can I?
Mr. Fu.
Can I ask Dr. Kasuga if she's amenable to moving that to a future, or not put a date on that presentation in the event that we're doing officer interviews, so you're not having a 3-day board meeting in February?
I guess it depends on the schedule of when we need to inform our stakeholders who may be interested in seeking scholarship. So it depends on the schedule of when they're accepting. Based on the dates of the scholarship cycle. If it's not urgent, then we can move it to August as usual. But if it needs to be shared earlier, then we can, I'm flexible to moving it.
That's also something we might be able to put in the newsletter, that information with dates and who to contact, just so it's out there in case the February.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm supportive. I'm mindful of the February agenda.
Absolutely.
Maybe including petition hearings and officer interviews, which might mean a more
ledge visits.
And
yes.
more packed schedule, but I just was raising that for awareness.
Thank you. Any other suggestions for future board meetings? Any suggestions in the room from the public for future board meetings? Mr. Moderator, can you please open up this item for public comment on WebEx?
We have 140 people. Let's see if we have one suggestion. We are open for public comment for future agenda items. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
I come after?
Oh, hold on a moment.
Am I holding, or is someone in the room holding?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Moderator, you keep going.
We have no request for public comment.
Thank you so much. We do have a public comment in the room. Dr. Farrell?
I request for future agendas that the board consider talking to other states about the feasibility of an alternative licensing exam and also talk to ASPPB about limiting their costs, any cost increase on their upcoming exam should we choose to use ASPPBs.
Dr. Farrell, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, I'm sorry. We did do a study on the cost impact of what it would take for California to implement their own exam. I don't remember, is it the most last meeting or 2 meetings ago? And it was broken down, very expensive for us to implement, but I just wanted to give you that feedback.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but I think that would have been if we'd pursued this as a sole state. There are so many dissatisfied states right now, and there's no big rush because we don't have that 2026 deadline that I think is worth revisiting. And Texas said in an article recently that they're so invested in keeping the prices down because they have a shortage of psychologists. And after Uvalde, their legislature is very interested in keeping the flow of mental health workers going. So they are considering singly funding their own, and they said other states could use theirs. And I know that would present a problem if it wasn't transferable. But when you see how many states are dissatisfied with ASPPB right now, and and what all of the issues around that, I think there might be a lot of states that would be interested in an alternative. I mean, we have an alternative group or agency doing the ethics exam. I think it's time to revisit our relationship with ASPPB.
Thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Polk, can you please come forward and let us know about our CPD credit for this morning?
Good morning. Thank you for attending the board meeting today. For attending the full duration of today's meeting, you will receive 2.25 hours for your attendance under CPD category number 1, attendance at a Board of Psychology meeting. For your records, again, please note today's date as November 8th of 2024, the name of today's meeting, which is board meeting, and 2.25 hours for your records. For individuals who called into the meeting, you will need to email the board at bopce@dca.ca.gov with your name, license number, and phone number you used to call in. If you signed in using a computer or mobile device, your attendance is automatically documented and no further information is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for attending and listening with us. Our next board meeting is in February. And with that, I adjourn the 2-day meeting of the Board of Psychology.